had to campaign to join the club.
No, Edward. They campaigned to join the club without having to pay the club dues. In this case, conscription. Also, it wasn't women, it was rich white women who wanted the vote. Most women opposed suffrage, about 3-1 in fact. That's why it didn't get done when John Stuart Mills was around and pushing for it. Women had no interest in it. But you notice the person who was trying to give them the vote first, and the ones that allowed them to eventually do that? They were those evil and oppressive men. You see, Edward, if men had wanted to keep women down and keep them from having rights, they would have done so. They had the positions of power in the government, the guns, and the armies. Go to Africa and walk around the villages there for a few hours, and you'll see what it's like when the people in power actually want to keep you down. Or just see what it was like in the country of our little friends down south. These, Edward, are the Freedom Riders. They were a group of activists made up of men and women who rode buses together into the southern United States in order to protest the non-enforcement of a legal statute that made it unconstitutional to segregate the bus. The southern states had done nothing to enforce the rulings, and the federal government had done nothing to make them enforce it. In Birmingham, Alabama, the local police commissioner made a deal with the local Ku Klux Klan members that the Klan could attack them for 15 minutes without the presence of the law to interfere. So the bus was forcibly stopped just outside of town, while the members firebombed the bus and then held the doors and windows shut so that the activists inside could not get out. It's only through extreme luck that the Klan was scared off before everyone inside could be killed. They were then rushed to a hospital where they were refused treatment by the staff and then removed from the hospital. Another such bus was attacked by Klansmen, police, and an FBI informant. The people were beaten almost to death with weapons and left there. But the Freedom Riders continued doing what they were doing, even though they paid for it in every town they stopped at. This, Edward, is what it looks like when you're fighting for your rights and the establishment is actually against you. If it were ever really true that men had only cared about keeping down women and had always held all the power and the rights, then there would never have been feminism, because there would have been shit all that women could have done about the things they wanted to or did not want to happen, short of revolution. But those suffragettes marked publicly and openly, men at fairs and city parks, made petitions to the government, even confronted the king and queen directly, and all without a single one of them ever being attacked or beaten, or threatened with the death of themselves or their families. Even when they firebombed buildings and assaulted officers of the law, the worst thing that ever happened to them is they got thrown in jail with other people who committed similar crimes. And they still bitched that being put in jail with the male prisoners was a horrible oppression to women. If this is women being denied rights and kept down, then this is the most limp-dicked, male-dominated, and oppressive society in the course of human history. Look, Edward, women didn't have the vote because they didn't want it, and they didn't go to war like the men did. Women got the vote as soon as 30% of them decided they wanted it, and they got it with no restrictions or costs, except for a little bit of their free time spent on screaming at the men in charge to do it for them. They didn't have to fight a revolution or be conscripted into a war. They didn't get the rubber hose. Only men ever had to do those things to get the vote. So please don't try to tell me about how everybody was ignoring women's rights. The suffragettes had the game set on easy mode compared to everyone else who ever tried to get the right to vote. And they got it sooner than many others as well, like before black people, whose suffrage they opposed. But I digress. Admittedly, that was a little ranty on my part, and I think I kind of went off on a tangent there for a bit, but I hopefully made my point. That being, Edward, that you're an idiot, and a duplicitous sack of tube stocks to add on to that.
But the MRAs believe that women's rights come at the expense of men's rights, and if...
No, they only seem to come at the expense of men's rights when feminists do it, which is the distinction that I note you are consistently avoiding having to make. It is not women that we are talking about that the MRAs don't like. It's feminists. And feminist is not a synonym for woman, no matter how much you want to try and pretend otherwise. Not only is feminism not about women, most women flat out reject feminism.
If the women were asking for anything more than what men already enjoy, the MRAs would have a point.
Can you name me, Edward, one right that men have which women don't. Because I've already listed several rights or benefits that women have which men don't. Now, I'm not aware of any rights that men have which women don't. So, feminism should be over and done with. Unless they're continuing to fight for more rights for women, rights which men do not have. So...
If the women were asking for anything more than what men already enjoy, the MRAs would have a point.
You know, I feel really lazy doing this, Edward. You essentially just make my arguments for me.
But they aren't, and they don't. What's the matter? Afraid of the competition, MRAs? You need that protected status?
Protected status? Okay, Edward, you're gonna have to explain something to me. How is the group most likely to commit suicide, most likely to die from violence, most likely to have violence happen to them, most likely to be harassed, and more or less equally likely to be sexually assaulted or raped, all with no one even paying attention to or showing concern for that, the one with protected status? I have to ask, exactly what color is the sky in Sock World? See, this is why I chose to do this. Not to defend MRAs, they can do that themselves. Just because this video is so stupid, so full of pure fail, that it was screaming out to be made fun of. This guy literally can't go more than a sentence or two without saying ridiculous shit, and no more than 20 seconds without contradicting himself. And this is only a 5-minute video that I'm responding to. Thank Lord Azatoth he didn't do a whole half hour. We'd be here all fucking night.
You can't take the heat? Get into the kitchen. Among their other greatest hits, the MRAs also mock rape statistics. A spokesman said the rape thing is a scam feminists use to gain political control and lots of money. And one of their lead voices wrote an article entitled, "Study Reveals Female Rape Victims Enjoyed the Experience." And so you're thinking, what kind of jackass would publish something like that? And this is where Paul Elam comes in. He wrote that empirically inaccurate bit of propaganda and his...
Empirically inaccurate bit of propaganda. Edward, you realize that the article you're talking about is a satirical article, right? An article that was written in order to demonstrate how easy it is for data and scientific research to be twisted into use for any purpose. It was supposed to be empirically inaccurate, Edward. That was kind of the point.
MRA website, A Voice for Men, is ground zero for zeros. Since most of Mr. Elam's claims of being mistreated at family court have been dismantled by his own daughter, I found him on Twitter and decided to let him know that his group's name is likewise inaccurate. I was just trying to help. So I tweeted, "Your name is inaccurate. You should change it to A Voice for Some Men who have poor social skills and issues with women. You don't speak for all men." His response was, "That's why it's A Voice for Men, not The Voice for Men. Clearly you don't understand the difference."
A legitimate point. That's one for his side.
And I replied, "Doesn't matter. You are still using the inclusive term men. You're A Voice for Some Men." Him, "You clearly don't understand the use of language. I can't waste time on someone so ignorant." Now there's the pot calling the kettle black. And I replied, "It seems you're the one who is missing the point on the usage of language, because arguing on the internet only produces losers." Let me...
Yes, men is inclusive, but not all inclusive. At least, not necessarily. All you need is 2 people to qualify as men. So long as he is a voice for at least 2 men, the name is accurate. Now you could add in some as a qualifier, but it's not really needed, as most rational people would be well aware that he does not speak for all men. Because only someone who is a narcissistic navel-gazer would claim that they speak for an entire gender. Right, feminists?
I have had to approximate the exact contents of the tweets, because when I...
Approximate the tweets. I find it kind of amusing that even though you wrote out the conversation yourself based on your approximation, he still managed to sound more reasonable and intelligent than you.
How can you be my voice when you're afraid of my voice? What's the matter, Paul Elam? Can't handle questioning? From a puppet? Is my phallic appearance too threatening to you? Voice for men? More like a voice for mice. Squeak, squeak, Paul Elam. Squeak, squeak.
Again, so says the guy who is literally a Sockpuppet account. And, hey, didn't you block those guys from Men's Rights Edmonton? Just saying. I don't know why I even brought it up, really.
Squeak, 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 squeak. Sad thing is that as stupid as men's rights rhetoric is, it's the only thing that draws any attention to the real issues hidden inside their crazy. Focus, Paul. You need to focus. Every time you go on about evil feminists out to steal your penis, you lose the chance for real issues affecting men to be taken seriously.
Yeah, you know what would help with those issues being taken seriously? If people like you didn't do things like this.
Advocating for men's rights is like advocating for snow at the North Pole. But hey, I thought, maybe I've been blissfully unaware that there were even more rights that I'm entitled to. So I decided to look into these people fighting for the rights I wasn't aware I didn't have.
Then there doesn't really seem to be a good way for them to do this that you won't bitch about then, is there?
In other words, Paul Elam, why not use your powers for good and not batshit?
I realize I sound like a broken record, but again, so says the 40-year-old man with a sock puppet. No crazy there.
Now, people who have called out Paul Elam and his ilk have become victims of ad hominem attacks on themselves.
Wait, what?
Now, people who have called out Paul Elam and his ilk have become victims of ad hominem attacks on themselves.
Wait, what?
Now, people who have called out Paul Elam and his ilk have become victims of ad hominem attacks on themselves. Their families, their friends, their pets, their grocer, their neighbors, their mailman. That's how cowards fight. If you take issue with what I've said, Paul Elam and company, take me on, not the people around me.
Oh, so I was right. This is about your little cupcake getting shot down for saying stupid shit on the internet. So she's hiding behind you, and you're hiding behind your sock. Tell me, Edward, what exactly is this harassment that you and those who have opposed them have received? Do you have any evidence, or is this that mystical kind of harassment that feminists always claim to get that vanishes the instant others turn to look at it? I don't think I even need to start bringing up all the times that feminists have attacked and threatened the people who disagree with them, do I? Because I will go down that road with you if you really want to, but you might not like the trip. But you know, Edward, if you go around lobbing attacks at others, maybe you shouldn't be surprised that they attack back every now and then. Just something that Leanna should maybe keep in mind.
Fight like a man.
Well, I was reading the comments on this video, Edward, and as far as I've seen, more than a few have called you out. I saw Karen Strong call you out to talk, Elam was there, so were others. Though I can't see where you've responded to any of them. It's almost as though you're using this video and channel as a platform to make claims from where you know others can't reach you.
Fight like a man.
Maybe that's the same reason you're hiding behind a literal sock puppet. Now, Edward, let's talk for a moment. Man to wank sock. I don't know Paul Elam, nor really care that much about him. No offense intended to the man himself. But he does what he does under his real name, putting his real face, information, and societal reputation to his opinions. While I don't have a web camera anymore, you can look back at my previous videos and see that I had no problem showing my face and putting my opinions to it either. My real name can be easily found in the About section on my blog, and I make no attempts to hide it. You, Edward, are a Much Music reject from the 90s with his hand up a sock, ranting in a barely intelligible manner and making poopy jokes for fuck's sakes. Don't pretend that you're some fearsome warrior on the internet fighting the forces of evil. Leanna may buy into that fantasy when you're in the bedroom, but in real life it rings a lot more hollow. But, as I said, Edward, you've been challenged multiple times by multiple people. Now let's see what you do next.